双语音标领航，注音阅读启蒙，叶兴阳有声读物。
History of Friedrich II of Prussia v4 by Thomas Carlyle. Carlyle's History of Friedrich II of Prussia. Book 4. Friedrich's Apprenticeship. First Stage. Point 1713-1728. Chapter 1. Childhood. Double educational element. Of Friedrich's childhood, there is not, after all our reading, much that it would interest the English public to hear tell of. Perhaps not much of knowable that deserves anywhere to be known. Books on it, expressly handling it, and books on Friedrich Wilhelm's court and history, of which it is always a main element, are not wanting, but they are mainly of the sad sort which, with pain and difficulty, teach us nothing. Books done by pedants and tenebrific persons, under the name of men, dwelling not on things, but, at endless length, on the outer husks of things, of unparalleled confusion. 2. Not so much as an index granted you, to the poor half-peck of cinders. Hidden in these wagon-loads of ashes, no sieve allowed. Books tending really to fill the mind with mere dust whirlwinds, if the mind did not straightway blow them out again, which it does. Of these let us say nothing. Seldom had so curious a phenomenon worse treatment from the dry as dust species. Among these books, touching on Friedrich's childhood, and treating of his father's court, there is hardly above one that we can characterize as fairly human. The book written by his little sister Wilhelmina, when she grew to size and knowledge of good and evil, italic, Memoirs de Frédéric Sophie Wilhelmine de Presse, Margrave de Berriath and italic, Brunswick.
Paris et Londres.
L8L2.
De vol.
8 VO. And this, of what flighty, uncertain nature it is, the world partly knows. A human book, however, not a pedant one. There is a most shrill female soul busy with intense earnestness here, looking, and teaching us to look. We find it a voracious book, done with heart, and from eyesight and insight, of a veracity deeper than the superficial sort. It is full of mistakes, indeed, and exaggerates dreadfully, in its shrill female way, but is above intending to deceive. Deduct the due subtrahend, say perhaps 25%, or in extreme cases as high as 75%. You will get some human image of credible actualities from Wilhelmina. Practically, she is our one resource on this matter. Of the strange King Friedrich Wilhelm and his strange court, with such an heir apparent growing up in it, there is no real light to be had, except what Wilhelmina gives, or kindles dark books of others into giving. For that, too, on long study, is the result of her, here and there, with so flickery a wax taper held over Friedrich's childhood, and the other dirty tallow dips all going out in intolerable odor. Judge if our success can be very triumphant. We perceive the little creature has got much from nature, not the big arena only, but fine inward gifts, for he is well born in more senses than one, and that in the breeding of him there are two elements noticeable, widely diverse, the French and the German. This is perhaps the chief peculiarity, best worth laying hold of, with the due comprehension, if our means allow. First educational element, the French one, his nurses, governesses, simultaneous and successive, mostly of French breed, are duly set down in the Prussian books, and held in mind as a point of duty by Prussian men, but, in foreign parts, cannot be considered otherwise than as a group, and merely with generic features. He had a Frau von Kamek for head governess, the lady whom Wilhelmina, in her famed italic Memoirs, and italic always writes Camkin, and of whom, except the floating gossip found in that book, there is nothing to be remembered. Under her, as practical superintendent, sous-gouvernante and quasi-mother, was the Dame de Roucoles, a more important person for us here. Dame de Roucoles, once de Montvale, the same respectable Edict of Nantes French lady who, 25 years ago, had taken similar charge of Friedrich Wilhelm, a fact that speaks well for the character of her performance in that office. She had done her first edition of a Prussian prince in a satisfactory manner, and not without difficult accidents and singularities, as we have heard, the like of which were spared her in this her second edition, so we may call it a second and, in all manner of ways, an improved one. The young Fritz swallowed no shoe buckles, did not leap out of window, hanging on by the hands, nor achieve anything of turbulent or otherwise memorable in his infantine history, the course of which was in general smooth, and runs, happily for it, below the ken of rumor.
The boy,
It is said, and is easily credible, was of extraordinary vivacity, quick in apprehending all things, and gracefully relating himself to them. One of the prettiest, vividest little boys,
with eyes,
with mind and ways, of uncommon brilliancy. Only he takes less to soldiering than the paternal heart could wish, and appears to find other things in the world fully as notable as loud drums, and stiff men drawn up in rows. Moreover, he is apt to be a little unhealthy now and then, and requires care from his nurses, over whom the judicious Rucols has to be very vigilant. Of this respectable Madame de Rucols I have read, at least 7 times, what the Prussian books say of her by way of biography, but it is always given in their dull tombstone style. It has moreover next to no importance, and alas, I do not yet too well remember it. She was from Normandy, of gentle blood, never very rich, Protestant, in the Edict of Nantes time, and had to fly her country, a young widow, with daughter and mother-in-law hanging on her, the whole of them almost penniless. However, she was kindly received at the court of Berlin, as usual in that sad case, and got some practical help towards living in her new country. Queen Sophie Charlotte had liked her society, and finding her of prudent, intelligent turn, and with the style of manners suitable, had given her Friedrich Wilhelm to take charge of. She was at that time Madame de Montbale, widow, as we said. She afterwards wedded Rucols, a refugee gentleman of her own nation, who had gone into the Prussian army, as was common for the like of him. She had again become a widow, Madame de Rucols this time, with her daughter Montbale still about her, when, by the grateful good sense of Friedrich Wilhelm, she was again entrusted, as we see, and so had the honor of governessing Frederick the Great for the first 7 years of his life. Respectable lady, she oversaw his nurses,
pap boats,
beer soup and bread, he himself tells us once, was his main diet in boyhood, beer soups, dress frocks, first attempts at walking, and then also his little bits of intellectualities, moralities, his incipiencies of speech, demeanor, and spiritual development, and did her function very honestly, there is no doubt. Wilhelmina mentions her at a subsequent period, and we have a glimpse of this same Rucols, gliding about among the royal young folk, with only one tooth left, figuratively speaking, and somewhat given to tattle, in Princess Wilhelmina's opinion, grown very old now, poor lady, and the dreadfulest bore, when she gets upon Hanover and her experiences, and Queen Sophie Charlotte's, in that stupendously magnificent court under Gentleman Ernst. Shun that topic, if you love your peace of mind. Italic, memoirs and italic, above cited. She did certainly superintend the boy Fritzgen for his first 7 years. That is a glory that cannot be taken from her. And her pupil, too, we agreeably perceive, was always grateful for her services in that capacity. Once a week, if he were in Berlin, during his youthful time, he was sure to appear at the Rucols soiree, and say and look various pleasant things to his chère maman, dear mamma, as he used to call her, and to the respectable small part she had, not to speak of other more substantial services, which also were not wanting. Rucols and the other female souls, mainly French, among whom the incipient Fritz now was, appear to have done their part as well as could be looked for. Respectable edict of Nantes French ladies, with high headgear, wide hoops, a clear, correct, but somewhat barren and meager species, tight-laced and high-frizzled in mind and body. It is not a very fertile element for a young soul, not very much of silent piety in it, and perhaps of vocal piety more than enough in proportion. An element founding on what they call enlightened Protestantism, freedom of thought, and the like, which is apt to become loquacious, and too conscious of itself, terming, on the whole, rather to contempt of the false, than to deep or very effective recognition of the true. But it is, in some important senses, a clear and pure element withal. At lowest, there are no conscious semi-falsities, or volunteer hypocrisies, taught the poor boy. Honor, clearness, truth of word at least, a decorous, dignified bearing, various thin good things, are honestly inculcated and exemplified, nor is any bad, ungraceful or suspicious thing permitted there, if recognized for such. It might have been a worse element, and we must be thankful for it. Friedrich, through life, carries deep traces of this French Protestant incipiency, a very big, wide-branching royal tree. In the end, but as small and flexible a seedling once as any one of us. The good old Dame de Rocoles just lived to witness his accession, on which grand juncture, and afterwards, as he had done before, he continued to express, in graceful and useful ways, his gratitude and honest affection to her and hers. Tea services, presents in cut-glass and other kinds, with letters that were still more precious to the old lady, had come always at due intervals. And one of his earliest kingly gifts was that of some suitable small pension for Montvale, the elderly daughter of this poor old Rocoles. Prussia, italic Friedrich der Grosse.
Eine Lebensgeschichte and italic 5 Volts. Berlin, 1832 bis 1834. Urkundenbuch.
Page 4. Italic Œuvre de Friedrich and italic, same Prussia's edition.
Berlin, 1846 bis 1850.
And c. 16.184, 191. The Herr Dr. J. D. E. Preuss, historiographer of Brandenburg, devoted wholly to the study of Friedrich for 25 years past, and for above a dozen years busily engaged in editing the italic Œuvre de Friedrich, and italic, has, besides that italic Lebensgeschichte and italic, just cited, 3 or 4 smaller books, of indistinctly different titles, on the same subject. A meritoriously exact man, acquainted with the outer details of Friedrich's biography, had he any way of arranging, organizing or setting them forth, as few men ever were or will be, we shall mean always this italic Lebensgeschichte and italic, here, when no other title is given, and italic Œuvre de Friedrich and italic shall signify his edition, unless the contrary be stated, who was just singing her dignities as it were, still in a blithe and pious manner, for she saw now, in 1740, her little nursling grown to be a brilliant man and king gone out to the wars,
2.
with all Europe inquiring and wondering what the issue would be. As for her, she closed her poor old eyes, at this stage of the business, piously, in foreign parts, far from her native Normandy, and did not see farther what the issue was. Good old dame, I have, as was observed, read some 7 times over what they call biographical accounts of her, but have 7 times, by heaven's favor, I do partly believe, mostly forgotten them again, and would not, without cause, inflict on any reader the like sorrow. To remember one worthy thing, how many thousand unworthy things must a man be able to forget? From this edict of Mantes' environment, which taught our young Fritz his first lessons of human behavior, a polite, sharp little boy, we do hope and understand, he learned also to clothe his bits of notions, emotions, and garrulous utterabilities in the French dialect, learned to speak, and likewise, What is more important? To think, in French, which was otherwise quite domesticated in the palace, and became his second mother tongue. Not a bad dialect, yet also none of the best. Very lean and shallow, if very clear and convenient, leaving much in poor Fritz unthought, unpracticed, which might otherwise have come into activity in the course of his life. He learned to read very soon, I presume, but he did not, now or afterwards, ever learn to spell. He spells indeed dreadfully ill, at his first appearance on the writing stage, as we shall see by and by. And he continued, to the last, one of the bad spellers of his day, a circumstance which I never can fully account for, and will leave to the reader's study. From all manner of sources, from inferior Valetale, Prussian officials, royal majesty itself, when not in gala, he learned, not less rootedly, the corrupt Prussian dialect of German, and used the same, all his days, among his soldiers, native officials, common subjects, and wherever it was most convenient, speaking it, and writing and misspelling it, with great freedom, though always with a certain aversion and undisguised contempt, which has since brought him blame in some quarters. It is true, the Prussian form of German is but rude, and probably Friedrich, except sometimes in Luther's Bible, never read any German book.
What?
If we will think of it, could he know of his first mother tongue? German,
To this day.
is a frightful dialect for the stupid, the pedant and dullard sort. Only in the hands of the gifted does it become supremely good. It had not yet been the language of any Goethe, any Lessing, though it stood on the eve of becoming such. It had already been the language of Luther, of Ulrich Hutten, Friedrich Barbarossa, Charlemagne, and others. And several extremely important things had been said in it, and some pleasant ones even sung in it, from an old date, in a very appropriate manner, had Crown Prince Friedrich known all that. But he could not reasonably be expected to know, and the wiser Germans now forgive him for not knowing, and are even thankful that he did not. Chapter 2. The German Element.
So that,
As we said, there are two elements for young Fritz, and highly diverse ones, from both of which he is to draw nourishment, and assimilate what he can, besides that Edict of Nantes French element, and in continual contact and contrast with it, which prevails chiefly in the female quarters of the palace. There is the native German element for young Fritz, of which the center is Papa, now come to be king, and powerfully manifesting himself as such, an abrupt peremptory young king, and German to the bone, along with whom, companions to him in his social hours, and fellow workers in his business, are a set of very rugged German sons of nature, differing much from the French sons of art. Baron Grumko, Leopold Prince of Anhalt-Dessau, not yet called the Old Dessauer, being under 40 yet, General Glasenapp, Colonel Dershaw, General Flans, these, and the other nameless generals and officials, are a curious counterpart to the Camises, the hot Charmoys and Fourcades, with their nimble tongues and rapiers, still more to the Beauzebers, Achards, full of ecclesiastical logic, made of Bell and Calvin kneaded together, and to the high-frizzled ladies rustling in stiff silk, with the shadow of Versailles and of the dragonnades alike present to them. Born Hyperboreans these others, rough as hemp, and stout of fiber as hemp, native products of the rigorous North, of whom, after all our reading, we know little. O heaven! They have had long lines of rugged ancestors, cast in the same rude stalwart mold, and leading their rough life there, of whom we know absolutely nothing. Dumb all those preceding busy generations, and this of Friedrich Wilhelm is grown almost dumb. Grim semi-articulate Prussian men, gone all to pipe-clay and mustache for us. Strange blonde-complexioned, not unbeautiful Prussian honorable women, in hoops, brocades, and unintelligible headgear and hair towers.
Ach Gott,